All right. So, hey everybody. This is You're Just Stupid, the podcast that makes you smarter and stupider at the same time. I'm Ray Ellis, aka the albino wino, and over here I got Renee Espinoza, aka Where God Poops.
It's true. I've worn my brown pants today. That's because you don't you don't know the topic today because you're too busy yourself pooping from all the Taco Bell that we were
Oh
talking
my
about last
goodness.
episode. Yeah. So actually I got a surprise for you. So we're gonna. So
Ooh.
honestly, listeners, Ray does not know the topic, so she's in the dark as much as you and probably I am. Not just kidding. I have done research, but you know what? Instead of telling you the topic, I don't even know the topic. That chaos, complete chaos. That's the topic today. No, I want to create a little story for you, Ray. I want you. Let's imagine because this is going to be all about history, and I want to take you back in history. So
Ooh.
I want you to think about what it was like. All right, the year is 1799. You're a French soldier serving Napoleon's army. Your brain is probably riddled with syphilis, um, and you've been digging in your fort, and all of a sudden you're digging to build this this like trench around this wall of this fort, and all of a sudden you hit something kind of hard. You hit it.
Ooh.
You're trying to dig again. Oh shit, that's hard. No, 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 no. It's even harder than a body. It's made of stone. You're like, huh? The hell's
Okay.
this? So you call over your commander. Your commander looks at this and realizes, shit, this is important. And congratulations, Ray. You have just discovered the Rosetta Stone. Well, the good news is the Rosetta Stone is not the only thing we're going to talk about. In fact, we're going to talk. It's kind of a broad category. We're going to talk about Mummymania and how just over Europe's weird interactions with mummies over the years. There's been a lot of them. In the Rosetta Stone, we
Like what
bring it
kind of
up
mummies?
because
What do you?
we're gonna just stick with Egyptian mummies today. Just good old fashioned Egyptian. You know, the pharaoh's wrapped up. He's cursing the archaeologists digging up his tomb, and they're all dying mysterious
Okay.
deaths as their eyes get ripped out. And luckily, Brendan Fraser's there to save the day type of deal.
All right,
So
I'm ready. I'm so
exactly,
excited.
you ready? So first,
Yes.
before we even begin with this, do you know how mummies are made? It's actually kind of interesting. So I was looking this up. Mummies, we really didn't know how Egyptian mummies were made till about 10, 20 years ago. Seriously. Like
Seriously?
we did see yeah, seriously. Like now there's ancient texts like the Greeks because of course the ancient Greeks fucking they like studied everything. Like they were way ahead of their time. Well, with the exception of diddling kids, they were a little into that. But other than that, they were way ahead in everything. So really, most there was no like surviving text really from the primary sources from ancient Egypt that would talk about how they're made. So we really basically what we did is we did like CT scans, we did biochemical analysis on like the linen wrappings that they're in and stuff, and so we just really like kind of nailed down like what how they were made, like really maybe just like the last 10, 20 years. This is pretty new actually. Like
Wow, that's incredible. I
if
thought it was always
if Egyptian
knowledge.
no if Egyptian mummies might be cold but the science is hot. No,
Ooh,
no, sorry,
hot
that was my
topic.
yeah, hot topic. Actually,
I
it
wish you
does
guys
get a
could
little
see
steamier later on too.
The face that Renee was doing.
But we're gonna be talking about some sexy mummies after a little bit. It's gonna get hot and steamy in here. So basically, mummies actually Egyptian mummies because there's all so people have been mummified for like tens of thousands of years, but most of the time this happens on accident. People get trapped in like certain like conditions, lakes and weird shit, and the bodies will desiccate and mummify. There's all sorts of like
Hmm.
crazy stories of like mummies being found all over the world doing this, but really. And there's other cultures that purposely mummify their dead, but let's be honest, we're going for the OG primary. We're going for the full sex appeal. You know, we
OG
want
Egypt.
yeah, exactly. OG Egypt. So really, the Egyptians really started embalming people about over 5,000 years ago. And their idea was we want people to be preserved in the afterlife so they can have all the shit they need in the afterlife. So you need your body in the afterlife, right? You got to have that well taken care
Hmm.
of. So that's why they preserved you. And you might need things like your organs, your heart. So they thought the heart was this, was like the center of like emotions and thoughts and stuff, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you got to have the heart." So they were real big on preserving the heart. There's one minor tiny organ they left out. That they didn't quite frankly give two shits about the brain. That's not important, but they were real big on the
Oh
heart.
yeah, fuck the brain. If we were worried about the brain, we wouldn't be doing this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. There's a reason why it's named the name the way it is.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so this one Greek historian, and I can't find his name right now. Herodotus. So he basically most of his
Herodotus?
description, Herodotus, he was a Greek historian,
Okay.
and he had written that there were like basically the mummification process. For the most part, he was correct. So I'm kind of combining what he
Hmm.
wrote and what modern day historians wrote, just to kind of make it simpler. So basically, there's basically three ways you were turned into a mummy. There was the poor, I can barely afford anything method. The people who want to avoid expense. That's Herodotus' words, by the way. You want to avoid expense because you want to go to the afterlife. You want to be equipped for the afterlife, but you know what? You got to save some coin too. I got to respect that. And then
Exactly. You gotta be good about it.
exactly. And then you got the most perfect method, which even Herodotus says was the most expensive method. So, which one do you want to hear about the first?
Okay, let's go down and poor
Oh, down and
first.
poor.
Let's start
Okay,
with that. Down and
so
poor.
let's say you're the average Egyptian hobo, but you still want to have a good afterlife. Hey, nothing wrong with that. So basically, what they did is there's always this compound called natron involved. It's a salt found in like Asia and Egypt, and the ancient Egyptians used this like mouthwash, and it was actually a pretty good antiseptic. So basically, what they did is they took some chemicals, they shoved up your ass as an enema, and then they put you in this natron bath for exactly 70 days. No,
Would it dry
yeah,
you out,
it's exactly
essentially?
it. Basically, it serves two purposes. The natron dries you out, and it's a really good antimicrobial. It's a natural antimicrobial because basically the bacteria can't live with all that salinity. So it's really good at like dehydrating you and making you antimicrobial. So perfect for mummies. And that's it. That's all they did. That was the poor method. So like I said, just like
So they didn't take out any organs or anything like
nope.
that. Okay.
That's for rich people. They just shove stuff up your, just like what we do with modern society. We take poor people, we shove things up their ass, and then we just let them sit for 70 days.
Dry
Let them
out.
dry out for 70 days. Exactly.
But they won't grow a lot of bacteria, at least.
Who eat mummies or poor
The
people?
anti-bac. Oh,
So they're
Anyone still with us?
exactly anyone. Please let me know. All the poor people listening to this podcast, well, if you can afford our podcast. Anyways, so then the next up.
Let's go with the rich
Oh, I
people,
was gonna go
yeah.
the next level up, the middle class. So what they did is they took an oil made from cedar trees and they actually injected it with like an ancient syringe in the abdomen, and then they took a butt plug and put it in your butt, so that way the oil could stay in there. And what the oil did is it would liquefy all the organs and also disinfect. And then they put the body in the natron, and that's it. So, and then after 70 days, they take the butt plug out, and all the oil drains out.
So essentially the only difference is they put that oil in there
Yeah,
instead of the.
yeah. and
Okay, I
and I
see.
don't and supposedly, so at least this way there's more preservation because supposedly the exact concoction they had was pretty good at uh you know cleaning out the interior of the body. So now let's talk about the one that is really that everyone has kind of heard of or know, the most perfect method. So first what they do is they actually take a metal rod and jam it in up your nose, and they liquefy the brain and just let it drain out because again, who
Right, that's the one
who
I've
yeah.
heard of.
And so that this is the one everyone's heard of. Then because the brain, who cares what that does? That's not important. You don't need that in the afterlife. And then what they do is they rinse the skull out with various chemical compounds, disinfect that, make an incision along the flank, actually take out all the organs, then rinse all the cavity, and then basically the whole cavity with basically palm wine, various spices, like this whole like elaborate process where they even like would bathe the organs in this too. And then what they would do is then either put them back into the body, or if you were really rich, they would put them in canoptic jars. You know, you've seen those really ornamental jars
No.
that like are yeah, you know, that
Oh.
have like a bird head or like a jackal head. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Just like fancy
Yeah,
Egyptian
exactly.
jars.
Yeah, and
Okay,
because the
gotcha.
canoptic jars were really for the rich, because basically what mummification did, it was a way to show off your wealth too, because you weren't just wealthy enough for one lifetime, you were wealthy enough for multiple lifetimes. You have this beautiful sarcophagus, you have this beautiful tomb you and your family are in. A lot of people would be buried with a lot of their wealth, and so it was really a big deal. So a lot of times, so you could think of the better the mummy, the the more money the person had basically in life. That's why a lot of the mummies that we found were pharaohs and noblemen or people who were directly related to the pharaoh. You know, the pharaoh's mom or the pharaoh's favorite servant,
Hmm.
because those were people of position of power. And so,
Right. They were more well
right,
preserved,
right,
so
exactly.
they were able to
And
last
so they,
longer.
yeah,
That makes
and so
sense.
mummification really, it was a religious thing. It was a economic thing. It was a big, 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 big deal. Um, until, of course, as usual, Europe goes in, and especially the fucking British, because what do the British love doing? Invading other countries and taking their shit and poo pooing all over it. Just like God poo poos all over me.
True
True
story,
story,
bro.
true story. So, shout out to England. Shout out to England, yes. Shout out to, if we have any British fans. We're both Yanks.
Oh, well, you know what? I already say that my friend Summon's a fan, even though she's never listened to one
Yeah, I was
second
gonna
of
say
this, but
at this point we're,
by
yeah, by
proxy.
proxy we have lots of fans. We're popular all over basically our inner circles, and maybe other people one day too, if this podcast does take off and we have T-shirts and sponsors. But anyways, and
Ooh, some t-shirts would
this
be
is
nice.
where later down the line we would like segue into like, some kind of sponsor segment. But anyways, so
Hello
hello, yeah,
Fresh.
exactly. Uh, this is where your favorite VPN inserted here, just 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 like we inserted that butt plug into those mummies.
Oh my goodness, what a great segue. I just need to say something too that's been bugging me for the past couple of
What's that?
days. So, I'm a glasses wearer, as is
Like,
Renee.
yes,
Um, and my glasses have become so loose that whenever I lean forward slightly, they fall off.
I
So,
have the
oh my
exact
goodness.
same problem. I hate it because it's a feed forward loop. Your glasses fall off once, they get a little more bent up, so they're gonna fall off your head. And then the fact that my head seems to be ever growing larger and larger, and Ray's head keeps getting smaller and smaller, neither one of our glasses are ever gonna fit us properly.
It's horrible. Today I was driving home and I sneezed and they fell
Yeah.
off. It was really funny, but it's dangerous.
If you care at all about the health and safety of Ray, send in dollars for Ray's glasses.
For
That's
my
our new charity
glasses.
foundation.
They look pretty much like Harry Potter's right
I
now. Just all bandaged up and loose.
You're not Harry Potter. I thought you were a fucking wizard.
Ooh,
So
awkward.
so that's a perfect transition from wizards to ancient medicine. To ancient
Mummies.
medicine. So so we're gonna take a little quick detour, very very quick, because I don't quite frankly want to get into the chemistry side of this. But
Oh, yeah, we did
yeah,
chemistry
we did a lot
last
of
week.
chemistry last week. So basically, eventually, Egypt is eventually colonized by the Romans. The Egyptian dynasties all die off. Mummification ends, and then eventually Egypt's conquered by the Islamic world. Blah 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 blah. But then, kind of what happens is people kind of forget about mummies for a while, and then little by little start rediscovering them. So one of the first ways the Egyptians never forgot about them. It was just the rest of the world forgot about them. And so one of the first ways to discover them is trying to figure out, hey, I bet these old ground up fucking corpses are like useful for something, like medicine.
They thought that the corpses were useful for something?
Way back in like Persia, there was this substance called mumia. It's basically what's called bitumen. It's like a petroleum that's like solid and sticky, and it's black, it's tarry, and the Persians, the Arab world, and the ancient Greeks all used it as like a salve. They put it on their wounds, they put it on their fractures. They believed that it would help them. It was like they would even just it for like stomach ulcers and everything. And it was
Would
black.
it actually do anything, or?
Um, I don't know. Probably not, because the fact that we're not all ingesting fucking bitumen probably means that it doesn't do shit. As does,
You're right. None of
yeah. I
us
mean,
are.
when was the last time you ate any petroleum, Ray? Any?
Sorry, I just got some stuck in my teeth.
Oh
I'm gonna try
yeah,
to pick it
yeah.
out
She's a
right now.
really big fan of that. Yeah,
Hmm.
you won't believe what
Petroleum.
she'll do to a Saudi guy for a barrel of oil. Anyways, so
For some
for so
salt.
exactly. So um, they had this stuff called mumia. Well, the problem is, what does mumia sound like?
Mummy.
Exactly. She's getting it, guys. Maybe she's just,
I'm not
maybe
that
she's
stupid,
not that
guys.
stupid, guys.
Take notes.
So of course, medieval Europe, and this is pre-Renaissance Europe, were full of a bunch of dumb fuckwits because the Renaissance hasn't happened yet, and they uh, are looking at mumia, and they're like, oh yeah, they're reading the Arabic text, and they're like, oh yeah, that must come from these mummies that Egypt has, and well, ironically, Egyptian mummies also can leak a black exudate from their embalmed corpses, and guess what it fucking looks like? Mumia. The same shit. So they figured, hey, you know what? It's hard to get a hold of this stuff from Persia and the Arab world, especially half the time when we're fighting them. Let's just get this like Egyptian mummy and fucking grind it up and turn it into medicine because that's a fucking thing.
Okay, so what time period are we
This
talking
is
about
like
again?
1200s, 1300s. Yeah. So this is, yeah. So
Interesting.
during this time, they would just straight up like take Egyptian mummies, grind them up, or like or scrape this exudate off the corpses and take his medicine for like back then you took medicine for everything. Oh, the same medicine that'll cure my cough will be the same one that I pour over a bone to fix a fracture, or the same one to fix my hemorrhoids that I'm going to shove it up my ass. They weren't these weren't the scholarly part. This is still very much the folk folk medicine. This is all pre-Renaissance.
I feel like people today still feel that way with like Vicks Vapor Rub.
No,
Do you ever
Vix
find that?
Vix actually works. J-
It just
Ask
fixes
all my
everything
ancestors.
for
Vix
people.
works. Vix works for everything. You take that back. And actually, now I think about Vix is petroleum based. But anyways. So, all right, here. Let's not. You know,
Hopefully, no dead mummies in it.
there is. Vix, give us a shout out right here. I'm going to start spreading rumors that that your product is filled with Egyptian corpses. Um,
Yes, that is a
Blackmail. Yeah.
threat.
Anyways, so Europe would just import mummies and turn them into medicine. Now, luckily, and during the Renaissance, people actually started developing a couple of fucking brain cells. And they didn't have your just they didn't have your just stupid back then. They had no one to inform them of this stuff back then. So they went back.
Could you imagine?
I'm pretty sure you and I would. Well, first of all, you would definitely been burned as a witch, and then I probably would have also been burned as a witch too because I have a giant head. Um,
And you do a good tuck job, so they just would have thought you were a
exactly.
woman.
Thank you. I would say my tuck jobs, solid 8 out of 10. Anyways, so they're like, yeah, this is fucking stupid. Why are we doing this? And they read the original Arabic text. They're like, yeah, this is stupid. Like we mistranslated this. This is really stupid, and I don't think this shit works. And little by little, like I was reading all this, and a lot of these people, like, it's actually kind of interesting because you read some Renaissance doctors be like, yeah, I'm not going to prescribe my patients this anymore because it doesn't work, it doesn't do anything. That's the dryers in. Hi guys. Um,
Oh, I thought it was like something up your
no,
ass.
no,
Little
no, no,
timer.
that would be going off.
Cause you
That'd be
did,
going off
cause you
continuously.
did give yourself a little jump when it
I was not
happened,
expecting
and
it. I was not expecting that. Also I wasn't expecting in it the fact that you could still buy mumia, and I mean the corpse mumia as late as 1924. Yeah,
where do they sell it?
Merck, the pharmaceutical company, they were like going through their old records and like saw that yeah, in 1924 you could buy a kilogram of mumia. It wasn't.
Did they still use it for the same purposes, like for
Yeah, it was like
everything?
say yeah, still were using it, but like as medicine progressed, and the 1700s, 1800s, less and less doctors were prescribing it because they actually saw, hey, this wasn't useful, or maybe this is just fucking creepy, you know.
And they still were getting them in 1924 from
Not
mummies?
really, because the Egyptian government, they were like, yeah, we're not going to sell any more of our ancestors to y'all. This is fucking stupid. So Europe, so because supply outpursued demand, they would just take corpses of like prisoners or slaves or anybody they killed and turn into mumia.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
I'm
Stop
not
it.
making any of this up. It's gross.
My license, it has a little organ
Yeah,
donor thing, and it also has a little thing that says like mumia. Yeah,
so actually, you don't realize that's a perfect segue, Ray. So this isn't necessarily mummies, but I don't know when I'm ever going to talk about this. So Ray has just volunteered to be a mellified man.
I did.
This one's not really. It's actually believed to be a legend. It's not really believed to be historical because it was written by a Chinese guy. I didn't look up his name because he's so full of shit, anyways. That supposedly elderly Arab men would practice this practice, and basically these Arab men, and when they're getting old, basically would sacrifice themselves. Basically say, "Look, I'm getting old. Let me be useful to future generations." So what they would do is they would start eating large amounts of honey and only honey until, and this is his description, that honey would even come out through their sweat pores and their feces would consist of honey. And
Like a preservative almost.
kind of.
Doesn't honey like never go bad? That's like one of those foods.
So this actually really similar. So there actually is a historical precedent on that. I'll just talk about it now since you alluded to it. So basically, ancient Assyrians would bury their dead in honey for that purpose, like a preservative. And supposedly Alexander the Great was also buried in a sarcophagus full of honey for the same idea. The fact that they wanted to preserve their corpses for the afterlife. So it was kind of like that, but basically, mellified man was used to believe to treat all sorts of diseases. These ancient, not ancient, but like historical man is fucking stupid. So our belief that, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's a belief of to become better you must become whole. The way you can become whole is to eat other people. So basically what they would do is mellified man allegedly was they would eat nothing but honey, then they would die, and then you take their body, which is already filled with honey, and put it in more honey, and then let it sit for like a century, and like it basically get and then people would eat this so-called confection. I don't know why that word kept coming up when I was reading this because I don't think of this as a confection, but people would use this confection. They rub it on their wounds or ingest it, and all sorts of other weird shit. But yeah, no, perfect segue into mellified man. So, guys, Ray has volunteered to be one.
Wow.
Mel,
Okay. Yeah,
you're all
I'm up
for it.
for it. I mean, honey's
Honey's
pretty good. I'll
really
eat
some
some
honey,
honey and I'll be soaked in honey for a century. Century, that's a
but
long
nothing but
time.
honey, Ray. Nothing but honey. Are you ready? Are
Ugh.
you ready for the ketoacidosis
When do I have to start this?
last week? Because
Oh
we need to be
God.
healed now, Ray. We need to be healed now.
Okay, you can unravel me in 100
Okay,
years and be like, oh, awesome.
exactly.
I'm gonna rub her all over my body now.
That's not creepy at all. Ah.
So this was in. So when was this?
The
When this
Mellified
would
Man,
happen? The
it's
mollified man.
actually believed to be a legend. It's yeah,
Oh, so it's not
that's not
even true. You
true.
said a Chinese
Yeah,
guy
it's
made it up.
probably made up. It's probably made up by some crazy Chinese dude who was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna say and do whatever the fuck I want because, we're China. They really China thought they were the center of the world, but then again, I think every country back then thought they were the center of the world. Well, now there's really only one center of the world, America.
America.
Goddamn right. So the good news is, after a while, people stopped eating mummies.
That's
That's good. We're
good.
making progress. The bad news is, they still did fucked up things with mummies.
Okay, so what are we talking? So we still talking like the Middle Ages,
So
the Victorian.
yeah, so this is like going to like the 16th century, 16th, 17th century. So like Renaissance Europe. So people are like, dude, guys, this is not cool. We need to respect these corpses. Let's stop eating them. Let's turn them into paint instead.
Are they doing this for like their own people? They're not buying them from Egypt anymore, right?
Um,
They're just doing this their own
No,
people.
well, a little both, a little both. So
Okay.
even though Egypt had banned sale of Egyptian mummies or trade of it, that hasn't stopped anybody in the past. Look how easy it is to get drugs, even though drugs are illegal. Exactly. So people would just be like, yo, bro, I got some sweet, sweet ancient Egyptian corpse over here, straight from the 18th century, 18th dynasty, bro.
Give me an
Give
eighth
me
of
give
that
me an eighth of that
mummy.
mummy, bro. I gotta paint this painting. It's gonna look badass, bro. So there's an actual pigment called mummy brown, and it's actually still a pigment today. Now the good news is, no, the good news is it doesn't contain people anymore. Uh,
That's good.
it, what it contains, I wrote this down. I don't really know what half the shit is. It contains quartz, hematite, goethite, and kaolin. But basically, it's like a reddish brown pigment. And but basically, what they used it because it was a like a reddish brown pigment that, and this is literally the description, was good for glazes, shadows, flesh tones, and shadings. And there's multiple
Flesh
flesh tones.
tones.
Yeah, ironically. But what's funny too is it wasn't necessarily widely known that Mummy Brown was made from people. Like legitimately, a lot of the artists who had heard of it are like, "Oh, it looks similar to like what I heard mummies look like." That's why they call it Mummy Brown. It wasn't necessarily that all of them knew it was made from people. So this is like the Soylent Green type of thing. Like we'll get to that in a moment. But anyways, so people would use it and they liked it because it was a very deep, earthy, reddish brown. But the problem is it was always hard to get. It was very variable. Like sometimes it would be very it'd stick to the canvas well. Other times it wouldn't. Why? Because fat. Because there's fat particles in there. And, it's like an oil. It's like an oil, so it's not emulsing well. And this color was apparently fairly popular because once again, demand exceeded supply. So guess what people did? Guess, Ray.
Killed
They
more
killed more
people?
people. They killed more people or used more corpses to make Mummy Brown.
What the fuck is wrong with people? Like, I really like this shade of color. I'm gonna just
I
kill people for it.
I know this is like A, that's a great horror movie concept, and B, I feel like that's going to be an overarching theme of our podcast is what is the fuck is wrong with people.
Yeah, maybe we should change our title to "What the fuck is wrong with people?" But then people are gonna expect an answer, and I don't have an answer on what the fuck is wrong with
We do not.
people.
I don't care how many episodes we end up recording. We will never find the answer to that. No, no. I mean, we already found out the answer that you're just stupid because you
That's
are.
true.
No, just kidding. We love you, listeners. If we have merch, please buy our merch.
Buy
Buy
our
our merch.
merch.
We don't have any yet, but
One shirt is $1,400. You're not stupid,
you're
I
not stupid. In
promise.
fact, you're so smart. That's why you bought the shirt. Anyways, so eventually in the 18th century, it started coming out that Mummy Brown is made from people. So people were like, dude, I'm not touching that shit.
I'm surprised people cared back then.
I mean, I mean, you're moving more towards the Enlightenment and people having basic human rights, and people like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be using a pigment that's made of like 5,000-year-old corpses, or you made it from prisoners. That's only something like the current Chinese Communist Party would do. Oh,
Shout out to the Chinese
no,
Communist Party.
fuck them. So we just got banned in China. That one took our second episode. Uh,
We were already banned
we
in China before we
we
even
probably
came
were. I
out.
probably am banned from China. Anyways,
Oh, it sucks. I would love to go to China. Like, it's too
China,
bad
yeah,
that they
that we're banned
just.
from there. It
Ugh,
really
so
sucks.
sad. Anyway,
So
continue.
so now we're reaching another point. 1798, Napoleon invades
Okay.
Egypt. Now, what's interesting is Napoleon. We should probably do an episode on him. He's actually probably more than one episode. He's an interesting fucking dude.
It'd be like a two-parter.
I think Napoleon deserves at least two parts from us. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but Napoleon was very. He thought forward a lot. He wouldn't just invade countries. He would do lots of other things. And one of the things he did when he invaded Egypt, he didn't just bring soldiers with him. He brought 167 savants, experts, scientists, archaeologists, historians with him because he wanted to catalog Egypt. And he created the Institut d'Egypte. I apologize. I to all our French listeners.
Renee, that was really
Thank you.
good.
Our French listeners are crying
Oh,
secretly, as they should be. Well, what's interesting is Ray, in her past life as a syphilitic Napoleon soldier, discovers the Rosetta Stone in 1799, literally 1 year later. And so, for those of you who don't know, it's not just a software that teaches you how to speak basic Spanish. The Rosetta Stone, literally, what it was a big tablet that had this decree written in three languages. Now,
and it's not even just big. Like, it's bigger than a
it's
person, isn't
fucking
it?
huge. It's fucking huge. Yeah, like that's why they found it is because they literally. I think the whole story of they were digging a trench is like actually close to the actual truth on this. Like soldiers were just digging and they found it, this giant stone object, and the basically the garrison commander is like, shit, this looks really fucking important. So this is the first time we finally have a human being who says, huh, ancient history. Instead of like eating it or like turning to paint, let me actually respect this and do something with it. Sure enough, it's in three languages. Now, the second language is not really the important one here. Let's just talk about the first language and the third language. The first language is ancient Egyptian. You know, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, and the third language is ancient Greek. Guess what the scholars could read? Ancient Greek. So that means for the first time ever, we could read all the Egyptian hieroglyphics because it was lost to us. It was lost to us. And so that's why, so basically, it was perfect because now you have all these direct. I mean, even even the scholars back then were like, I don't think this is exact translation, and they're like 95 whatever percent. I don't. I'm not into the study languages that much, but like it's pretty. It's the same decree, and so they were able to figure out, oh, bird dancing pharaoh, eye of Anubis equals equals butt plug, and they figured it out from there.
Oh my gosh, that's so weird because I literally have that same tattoo. Now I know what it
Yeah,
means.
I've told you, right? That meant butt plug. You didn't believe me.
Oh my god, I shouldn't have gotten it on my ass too. Jesus. Also, quick side note, so I don't know if I know you've seen this on my ankle. I have like a little
Yes.
Nepalese saying tattooed that I got in Nepal. There's a doctor that I work with now, and he is Nepalese. So I like lifted up I showed him my ankle, and I was like, "Can you read this?" Because I never knew what it said, and my whole family just joked that it said like "stupid white girl travels to Asia," and it means something very nice, like the Om mantra, like be thankful for what you
Oh,
have and
okay,
stuff.
nice.
I was like, "Oh, I'm," so I called my dad, and I was like, "Suck it."
It doesn't mean something foul and or racist. Fuck you, Dad. And then once the Rosetta Stone was found, it actually was like big worldwide news, like legitimate, because it was a big deal. It really was. After that, it kind of started triggering a wave of like European interest in Egypt. Like they go, yeah, because now all of a sudden, like this tomb before is like, oh, it just has a bunch of hieroglyphics on it. No, now you can read this shit. What does it say? Oh, here lies buried blah blah blah. And you know, champion of the butt plug of this dynasty. Exactly. So people are getting really really excited, and then so kind of an interesting one, and two remnants of this are the Cleopatra's Needles. There's these two big obelisks. You've been to London, right?
Yes, I have. I definitely know what you're
Yeah,
talking
that
about.
was gifted to the British government by the Egyptian government, and they actually moved it from where was believed to be Alexandria to now London. And there's one like literally in Central Park,
And they're called Cleopatra's
Needles, but
Needles?
they have nothing to
Okay.
do with Cleopatra. It's just they knew Cleopatra was super well known in the ancient world because not only being the supposed legendary beauty, but for being really the great example of a strong, powerful female who used what she had, basically her assets, literally and figuratively, to get power. I mean, she was banging Julius Caesar, so there you go.
And Mark Anthony, you know?
She was banging him too. And in my Julius Caesar Mark Antony fan fiction, they're banging each other.
Oh, love it. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, the ancient. I'm going to start putting out some ancient Roman fan fiction. It's going to be sweet.
So at this point, it's like the early
It's
1800s.
like
Like they
solid
have
middle
this
eight.
new
Yeah, it's like the
obelisk.
solid like middle of the 1800s. People are getting really excited about mummies, like in ancient Egypt. Like they're like literally, it's a tourist destination. People are going to visit tombs. People are really getting really excited. As an example, in 1852, Alexander Hamilton, the 10th Duke of Hamilton, dies. You're probably thinking, who gives a shit? You're right, with one exception. He wanted to be mummified after he died, and so he got a surgeon who was famous for his expertise in mummies to mummify him after his death. And yeah, he's mummified. He wanted to be mummified like an Egyptian, and like it wasn't the exact same process because back then we didn't know how to do it. But yeah, he agreed to do it. And this surgeon was famous for not just studying mummies, but he would really study mummies, and that's kind of where you already said unroll me, and I'm glad you gave that segue because that's what he'd do. He would perform autopsies and unrollings, whether it be in museums or in like the equivalent of an operating room, or even at parties.
Like at parties, he'd be unwrapping someone.
The Victorian English, being the giant douchebags they were, would
Yeah, sexually
and
deprived.
actually I'm going to get to that too. I was not joking about sexy mummies.
Oh no, I can. Oh, I hope that's
No,
not where
no.
it's
Thankfully,
going.
it's not going that far. It's not going that far. Thankfully, that's the one. That's the one time we're not crossing that line in this podcast. So, like, people would go around and they would have parties because you could buy a mummy. People would buy an Egyptian mummy and they would have it in their library, in their personal library. Like, oh, here, look at this fine first edition novel I have of blah blah blah. Oh, and here's my 3,500-year-old corpse. But anyways, this is back to this first edition, and what the rich would like to do is they would have a party where they invite all their rich douchebag friends and they would take a mummy's corpse and unwrap it. And of course, it would be fucking destroyed because you've taken this thousands of year old corpse and
Yeah, I feel like that's so
I
disrespectful.
don't know if it's where it lies in the disrespect column as far as like comparing that to like Mummy Brown and Mumia. I don't know where because they're all fucked up.
Someone write in and let us know
Yeah,
what's
let
worse.
me know. Eating them, turning them into paint, or just unwrapping them and like as like oh, like instead of getting around and playing Nintendo Switch, you went around and unwrapped a mummy.
Ew, I bet parts of it were like stuck too, so I bet you had to like pull for some of it.
Kind of a one way to signify is how popular this was is novels. Like people got really obsessed. Like they'd write all sorts of stories, and especially now that we can read and we knew the names of these guys, these pharaohs, we could read a lot of this stuff. This is where a lot of famous books and stories came from. The Mummy's Curse became a thing because there was always warnings on this tomb. Anyone who desecrates this tomb will be cursed 1,000 years. And so that's where
I feel like in what they were doing was definitely desecration.
they probably a couple of these guys probably deserve to be cursed. Maybe not all the archaeologists, but definitely some of these fuckers. And people are really attracted to this because I mean, yeah, mummies look old and desiccated, but when you really look at them, considering this corpse is 3, 4, 5,000 years old, they're really well preserved. I mean, kind of astonishingly, and also the fact that remember again, harken back to the beginning. What are the best preserved corpses? The nobles, the pharaohs, yeah, the rich people. So now you have this story where the pharaoh is coming back for you desecrating his tomb, and his pharaoh Egyptian queen looks very similar to how she looked all those years ago. Well, she's rich and powerful and young and beautiful. So people would actually legitimately like sexualize some of these, like kind of like how they would with vampires. Like, that sexy vampire. Well, it was like the sexy mummy, the big, strong Egyptian pharaoh, the beautiful, exotic female mummy queen. Yeah, and it was kind of a blend off of. They kind of took it as like a blend of like this Cleopatra. They were always looking for Cleopatra because she was the most beautiful woman ever. Look how beautiful these mummies are, and they're preserved, and they're not even Cleopatra. How beautiful would she be? And then also kind of a racist version of the veiled, mysteriously beautiful Arab woman. Like behind that veil is the most beautiful woman in the world, or something like that. Kind of like that too. The most famous
They weren't beautiful though. That's the thing. Were they just
I
picturing what
I
they
think
used
they
to
I
look
think it was
like?
kind of like a fantasy. Like, wow, this corpse is 4,000 years old, and it looks this good. Imagine how beautiful or how handsome this guy was, or how beautiful this woman was back then. Yeah, I mean, because you've never seen anything like this. This is astonishing. I mean, it's still cool. Like, if you ever gone to a museum, you're still like, wow, this is pretty fucking cool. So one of the most famous novels was the 1903 novel Jewel of the Seven Stars by Bram Stoker. Yes, that Bram Stoker. Yeah. So he wrote a mummy novel, and it was kind of like the same idea where like this mummy pharaoh rises from his tomb after people break into his tomb, and it ended up being a basis for two movies. The first was the famous 1932 Boris Karloff mummy, which also took from his Dracula novel. They took elements of both from it. And then the Hammer Horror 1971 movie, Blood from the Mummy's Tomb.
The Hammer
Hammer
Horror?
Horror, not the Hammer Horror.
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 I mean, Hammer Horror sounds a lot more entertaining. Have you seen any of said movies? Because I
The
have
Hammer
not.
Horror movies? Yeah, I love them. Yeah. I love those old horror movies. Actually I really enjoy them. I get a kick out of them. I find them entertaining. There's a lot of
I just don't think I've ever seen those ones. I used to get them when like Netflix used to deliver to your house,
Those were yeah,
remember?
those were like with Peter Cullen and oh my god, I can't think of his name.
Vincent
Vincent
Price.
Price was in a couple of them, and oh, Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee did a lot of those too. Yeah, he was very. Him and Peter Cullen were very famous for doing a lot of them. And Vincent Price, I think, did a few. But no, I like those. That maybe if there's something interesting there, they were famous for being very bloody and violent and showed a lot of nudity.
Win, win,
Like
win.
50s, 60s, 70s. Yeah, they really like they're tame by today's standards, but like straight up, there'd be like a chick would be attacked by a vampire and he'd rip off her clothes and she'd show her tits, or like they would show blood or like people dying on screen. Like they're, I mean, like I said,
Those are the
they're tame
days.
now, but like they're ahead of their time. They were a little raunchy. Yeah. Plus, I mean, blood from the mummy's tomb. How like quiche is that? So yeah, that's it. That's thankfully we didn't go into the necrophilia part. I know that's what you're afraid of. That
That's what I was worried was gonna happen because, people do some fucked
people
up
were doing a
shit.
lot of fucked up things, and I'm sure that happened, but I don't want to look up that. I'm pretty sure I should be censored if I start googling that, and I didn't.
I just think it's so crazy. Like, I'm gonna have a dinner
Yeah,
party and I'm going to invite Renee over and we're gonna unwrap a fucking mummy.
you're Lady Ray of the Ninth Duchess of Farts McGee, and I'm exec Farts Magoo, and I'm Baron Lord Duchenstein, Renee the Third, uh, Duchess of the Duke of the Limp Dick, and I'm like, oh, excellent, this tea is wonderful. Oh, I happen to see. Is that your latest mummy, Lady Ray?
By the way, this tea was made.
But by the
Why?
way, this tea was made from this mummy. Oh, delightful. That should cure my tuberculosis right away. So yeah,
Right on, that was a good
yeah, thank
topic.
you.
I thought that was
I
pretty
thought it was
good.
interesting. Like we got weird with it, as apparently a lot of people throughout history did. And you know what? I hope y'all learned a little bit something about ancient Egypt. I think Egypt is cool as shit. I'd love to go. I think ancient Egypt is cool as shit. It really, I mean, it's probably one of the oldest. It and China are two of the oldest civilizations we know about. That we have all this history and grand like religion and architecture in it. I think it's fucking badass. And we, instead of respecting their ancient culture, we ate their people, and we think all their fucking archaeological objects and tombs and stuff were made by aliens. Instead of respecting that, hey, maybe these guys were just really cool and badass.
I think it was just the slavery when they just don't care about people. Anything can be accomplished.
Correct. That's so not caring about people is going to be a fun segue to my next topic. Also,
Ooh, okay, awesome. I'm gonna fit
we're
right in
just
with
going to
that.
say human rights violations. Sexy. Mm.
Ooh, all right. Sexy human rights
Mm-hmm.
violations. I feel like I should start talking like this. All right, everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed the podcast. Please continue to listen and let us know which is worse, unwrapping a mummy, eating a mummy, or rubbing it all over your
Or
body.
rubbing all over your canvas.
Or rub. Oh, that's right.
All right, guys. We'll see you for the next episode.